Hi everyone, welcome to On Wellbeing. On Wellbeing, or OWB for short, is a podcast that shares everything to do with health, wellness, and how to live your best lives. I'm your host, Cheryl Han, and I will be inviting guests from various walks of lives and disciplines to share their expertise as well as their personal journeys with us. I'm really excited about our guest today. Our guest is a board-certified family, sports, obesity, and lifestyle medicine physician, and he's also an associate professor at Stanford University. So I took a course on nutrition last year, and at first I thought it was just going to be all about nutrition. But when I signed up for it, I really loved the approach because it was a different concept altogether that was new to me, and I was introduced to the idea of lifestyle medicine. So I reached out to my lecturer and I said, hey, I'm going to start a podcast to share everything I've learned, or as much as I can that I've learned from the course. Would you be keen to come on to my show? And I'm so glad that he said yes. Welcome, Jonathan. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
For some of our listeners who actually might be clueless about the term lifestyle medicine, could you give us an overview of what lifestyle medicine is all about?
Yeah, I think it can be a confusing term for many. I think the way that I sort of think about it more simply, it's the actions and behaviors that we do day to day that impact our health.
And why the word medicine? Are you implying that maybe lifestyle habits can be medicine?
Yeah, I think that's the reason the specialty came into existence. I mean, we know that there are lots of things that one can do to help prevent disease and improve general health and wellness. I think certainly from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, their big view is that when these are dosed intensively and correctly, they can oftentimes be as powerful as medications, pills, or even procedures, depending on what study you look at and what intervention you design.
It's quite an interesting take because in the world today, we're always looking for quick fixes. We're looking for medication, surgeries, and all of that. And yourself as a doctor as well as a physician, how would you see the importance of lifestyle habits, and how would you encourage a shift in embracing lifestyle changes, and how much of your lifestyle really impacts your health?
Well, the good news is changes can start immediately. So even having a workout today, definitely we know improves health even in the short term. I mean, I think when you're talking about reaping the longer term benefits and maybe some of the more impressive data, I mean, we have pretty compelling research that suggests probably almost 80% of the majority of chronic disease could be prevented via lifestyle changes. Probably about 40% of premature mortality could be prevented if people really adopted all these lifestyle measures. So there really is a big prize to be had here. I think if we are able to sort of cultivate and nurture and embrace a society that really makes these changes and habits easier to do. Lifestyle really is foundational, one, to treating any disease, certainly for prevention, but I would even go beyond that and say just for people to have health and well-being and even to improve their performance or day-to-day life. I mean, it's one of the few things that has very little, if any, side effects. And most of those, by the way, are good. Versus comparing it to a medication, which is obviously a bit easier to just take a pill than it is to start a workout program and change your diet. But again, it's not that there's anything wrong with any of those approaches. I think they can all be used collaboratively. And there are certainly times when medications are appropriate and surgery can be life-saving. So it's not to say that these things are wrong, but I think we can also embrace and get a lot more value from lifestyle medicine, in and of itself.
Yeah, so it's collaboration, I suppose, looking at all aspects of helping yourself become healthier. And nutrition is often at the forefront when we talk about health. So that is, of course, like what you mentioned, one of the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. What are some key principles that you would advise in terms of a healthy diet, and how can we incorporate them into our daily lives?
The nutrition question always seems to find controversy for whatever reason. And I think it's because there's so many different approaches. And depending on how you design studies, you can find some benefit in this approach or that approach. And I think fundamentally, I think we do need to understand that there are individual differences. So some people can do really well on very different approaches. We get into trouble when we're exploring things like the ultra processed foods, which are honestly what the majority of the food system is in the United States. I'm not sure exactly what it is over there, but I'm sure it's increasing in a similar rate as it is in the United States. And so that's when you really start to get into trouble. But I think when you're talking about whole foods that are minimally processed, that have one, if any, ingredients other than the food itself, you're usually going to be in pretty good shape. So I think those are some general framework things that I think about when I think about, is this a healthy kind of diet? And then you can go beyond that and say, was it a healthy diet for this individual? And then you would want to look at markers, health markers, things like, are they able to manage their weight appropriately with whatever food consumption they're having. Is their blood pressure controlled? Is their blood sugar under good control? Do they have a good lipid profile? Do they have evidence of inflammation in their body, or are they having, food insensitivities or things like that? So I think you can sort of go down the list and sort of figure out for yourself on, is this a good eating plan that really is improving my markers of health, which to me is really what you want to try to aim for.
Okay, this is a little off the topic and a little bit more personal. Tell us, what is a typical day of your, what's your typical lunch, breakfast, and dinner like? I'm
Sure.
curious.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always hesitant with anecdotes because just because something works for me doesn't necessarily mean it works for other people. I mean, I typically tend to skew more towards a predominantly plant-based, but I'm not exclusively plant-based. And so I'm trying to think of even what I had today. My diet does differ and vary a little bit from day to day, but yogurt, like a Greek yogurt with some berries and nuts, is a pretty common breakfast or something I might have. I worked out this morning, so I also had a banana, and I did use a protein shake, which is not a whole food, but I was a little pressed for time. I had a nice salad this evening. I actually ate with my parents, so it was a chicken salad this evening. I'm trying to think what I had for lunch exactly. I had some veggies and some hummus. And I think I just had a sandwich for lunch. So nothing too fancy or amazing, really. I mean, I'm a pretty simple eater, and I usually will sprinkle some nuts. I had an apple with a little bit of cheese today. So yeah, I kind of all over the place, but I'm more of a flexitarian than a pure any specific camp. And again, I think my focus mostly is on mostly whole foods, and then having them in relatively good proportions.
Yeah, but I like what you said, like whatever works for you might not work for another person. So it's quite individual. For a lot of us, especially, well, city dwellers, right? It's difficult to really find whole foods very naturally. I mean, we can go to a grocery store, and it's all imported, and it's expensive, and it's difficult to really find time to cook as well. So for city dwellers, any tips that you might have for us to, I guess, incorporate more whole foods into our diet and in a quick way, like what you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, there's no secret here. I mean, and I totally feel for you. I mean, we have many folks in the United States that live in food deserts and other places that honestly don't have access to healthy foods. And it's really difficult if I say, well, you need to get your fruits and vegetables, and you say, well, there are none to be had. I mean, there's not really a whole lot we can do to fix that. So the choices you have are subordinate to the choices, or the choices you make are subordinate to the choices you have. And so if you were in that kind of position, then it's really doing the best you can and not beating yourself up that, hey, it can't be perfect. So I think in those situations, then you want to look and say, well, hey, are there any other options? Are there things like frozen foods? Like, can you get frozen vegetables or canned vegetables? Sometimes you can get them with like added salt or things like that. So as supplements, so maybe you can't get the fresh produce, but perhaps there may be a frozen or a canned form that, is going to be comparably good from a nutrient perspective. I think even if you can't get that, I mean, you can still get lots of good nutrition from dried things, which are relatively less expensive. So things like beans or legumes or lentils. I mean, nuts and seeds are typically generally available. I mean, I'm a big fan of things like batch cooking or like doing meal prep for the week. So taking a day on the weekend to go shop and buy all your food, and then prepare it, put it into nice portions. So during the week, there's no time, and you basically just can pull it out, have a healthy meal that you've already made. The challenge with eating out is, even if you eat the same thing that you prepared at your house, you're almost always going to get probably an extra, 20 to 30% extra calories in the same food when you get it from a restaurant, because they're optimizing for taste and flavor. Just as a fun anecdote, one of the famous like foodies or food connoisseurs, he made a comment about, why do mashed potatoes taste so much better when you go to a restaurant than the ones you make at home? And he said, well, that's because there's 3 sticks of butter in the mashed potatoes in the restaurant that you wouldn't be putting in when you were making them yourself. So yeah, I think they're optimizing for taste. So I think it's just important to understand that when you're choosing to go out, that you're probably going to get some hidden calories that you didn't realize were there.
Yeah, absolutely. You can control what you eat when you cook yourself, and you know what goes exactly into your meal. So, okay, moving beyond nutrition, physical activity is another essential component of a healthy lifestyle, and also one of the pillars, right, of lifestyle medicine. Tell us more about physical activity and how it's important in the concept of lifestyle medicine.
Yeah, I mean, this is my personal bias. I mean, I grew up in the fitness world, and I still have my personal training certification. So I'm definitely a fitness fanatic, and I think exercise is one of the single best things one can do for their health. I think bad nutrition can take you much further down the road of disease, but I think once you get a certain point of eating well, I think you really don't have that much ceiling to keep getting healthier and healthier by improving your diet more and more, versus I think for most people, you can continue to get lots of health benefits as you continue to change and adjust and increase your exercise over time. Again, the beauty of physical activity is a single session, you start to get benefits immediately, right? It improves your mood, your outlook, your creativity, makes you feel better, can bring down your blood sugar levels. And so you get all those benefits immediately, plus you get all of the long-term benefits too. So as much as I love to talk about the innumerable health benefits from physical activity, and there really are a litany of them, I think my focus really is on helping people understand that if we can get you over that initial hump where exercise may not be as fun and is really hard and hurts, but if you can sort of stick with it long enough that you can sort of start to change a little bit of your body's chemistry, you'll start to feel really good after you do it. The more people can generally be active, I think they'll find that they'll feel much, much better. And the other sort of barrier I'd love to help people remove is that the most benefits you get from physical activity come from the first steps that you take. You literally just have to get up off the couch and walk around your neighborhood or do some sort of activity, you know, with your friends or your family. Like, it doesn't have to be profound, but you definitely want to start doing at least something, because you really will find that it will improve your life probably more so than any other single behavior you could do.
Absolutely. I think you've, as a personal trainer yourself, you must have, I guess, observed like lots of changes in people when they start to incorporate movement or activity into their lifestyle. You mentioned about the initial hump, right? So for someone who is, I guess, well, before the hump, right? Like meeting the hump, and how do you encourage someone to really like get through that, like to get into the habit?
It's a really good question. So first, I'd congratulate them. I'd say this is wonderful that you're taking this initiative in your life, and I think this is going to be really awesome. So number one, let them pick the activity and encourage them to find something that at some point they liked or they're interested in or they want to try. Everyone can always find something they like to do when they were a kid. And maybe it was, you know, skipping rope or playing on the playground or, you know, playing a sport or, you know, whatever it was. But find something that was like, hey, you know what, I really did like that at some point in my life. So you can tap into sort of that native like love of the thing. I think the other piece is finding some accountability for them, because it's hard in the beginning when it's early in the morning or late at night and you're like, oh, I told the doctor I was going to work out, but I'm just tired and I don't want to do it today. So having a buddy or a friend or someone that, you know, you're going to have to see, and if you don't show up, like, they're by themselves. And so that's not cool. And then just encouraging that anything is better than nothing. So set your goals super small. Like, if it has to be 5 minutes today, because that's all you can muster, that's awesome. Like, let's start with 5 minutes or a 2 minute walk outside your house and back. So part of it really is just building the habit versus feeling like, oh, well, you got to go for at least 30 minutes or it doesn't matter.
Nice. I like that. I like that. Tiny habits and big changes that you can see after, right? Yeah. So let's move on to another issue that a lot of us have in this like modern society where we live in cities, and that is sleep. So I read an article, like basically the most sleep deprived cities we're talking about are like New York, Tokyo, Seoul, and Singapore is also one of them.
And sleep is often overlooked. It's the one thing that usually gets cut out. When life gets too busy and hectic and chaotic, sleep is usually the thing that goes, because it takes the longest amount of time of all the behaviors. I mean, you have to sleep to live. I mean, if you don't sleep, you quite literally will die, which is an unusual sort of circumstance to be in. And weirdly, humans are the only species in the world that intentionally sleep deprive themselves. Every other species will find a way to take a break and sleep, but humans have now gotten good enough that they can go against their own internal drives and desires to do so. And I think a lot of the sleep problems, particularly in the cities that you mentioned, have stemmed from the 24/7 society, right? It's the I want it right now. There's always something happening. There's always news. There's always social media in your face. Your phone is like a thing that never leaves you, and it's always on. And there's an infinite number of things that you could look at and endless material you could read. I think when you're thinking about good sleeping habits, one, again, it's prioritizing it, saying, hey, my sleep matters and I function and feel a heck of a lot better when I get good sleep. And it really does spill into everything else. I'm sure everyone can relate to when you sleep really well and you wake up very refreshed, like you have energy, you're excited for the day, you perform better, you're more efficient at your job, you have energy to work out, you actually start to make better food choices, because when you're sleep deprived, you tend to crave carbohydrates, and you tend to eat more. So consistency is really important. So going to bed at the same time each day, getting up at the same time each day really help set your circadian rhythm. If you can have bright light exposure early in the morning, that really helps as well. And as you're sort of getting towards bedtime, again, you want to try and have a nice bedtime routine. So do something consistent. So again, put your brain in the state of, okay, like these are the things I do before I go to bed. If you can do some nice, meditative or relaxation work, that's probably ideal. And then, having a good space to sleep in. So preferably with minimal, if any, lights. I mean, a cave is honestly a perfect place to sleep. It's cool, it's dark, and you're not going to get many external sounds or things that are bothering you. Set your wake up time and commit to it, because you're basically just losing and getting poor sleep if you're going to snooze, 10 times in a row. You're really not getting any quality sleep during that at all. So the more you can detrain the snooze function, I think the better you'll end up feeling, even if it doesn't perceptibly feel like that is going to work out better.
So you mentioned about living in a cave, and I love that idea. It sounds so sweet and sounds like I can imagine myself like getting a restorative sleep in that environment. What are your thoughts about like people who need some help in terms of like getting the routine, right? The sleep routine. Can sleep aids help? For example, like melatonin pills. What are your thoughts? And is it okay to, I guess, rely on such sleep aids?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like anything else, I think there are times and places where they can have a role. I would definitely only view them as a very short-term solution. I think there is an important difference when you're thinking about sleep. So you have conscious wakening, you have unconscious, which is just kind of like being blacked out, and then you have sleep. And so you can knock yourself out, but that's not the same physiologically as getting good restorative sleep. But I would say is if people are having problems, it's certainly worth exploring and figuring out what is the problem versus just throwing, a sleep aid or something at it. If that's you, then you definitely want to explore, potential treatment options, rather than just say, well, let's just try some over the counter stuff to see if I can, get something fixed. So if the sleep hygiene stuff doesn't work, or you really think you have a pathology, it's definitely worth seeing a healthcare provider.
I think a lot of times the insomnia that we have is also stress related, and a lot of health diseases is also stress related, and a lot of like weight issues is also stress related. In today's world that's fast paced, how would you recommend like building up stress resilience in a person?
That is a really tough question. And I think if I knew how to get rid of stress or deal with it, I'd probably be an extremely wealthy individual if I could
You'd be a
relay that
guru.
to other people. The interesting thing about stress is that it is a very individual response to it. I think the first thing to understand is that depending on who you are, the level of stress does not necessarily correlate with the event that you are dealing with. So for some people, like breathing exercises can be really wonderful. So putting a pause in there and just doing 4 square breathing or whatever your favorite flavor of the breath is. It can literally just be take 10 deep breaths in and out. And then that can sort of quickly calm your parasympathetic nervous system down and really release a lot of calming hormones to sort of deal with the acute situation that you're in. If it's more of a chronic stress, then I think, again, it's figuring out ways that you can cope, manage, and deal with it. I'm a big fan of just going for a walk or, doing any kind of physical exercise, having tools, tactics, or activities you can do when you're feeling that unease. That is not a substance, that is not just turning straight to food, which I agree is very common in society, but finding a helpful way to deal with those emotions.
I love that. I love that. And it's a very nice reminder that it's very individual, right? And you can't expect the same response from two people in the same situation. In your own opinion, right? You have highlighted many, many important strategies today with regards to sleep, nutrition, physical activity. As we wrap up today's session, do you have any final words or nuggets of wisdom or encouragement for our listeners or our community who are, I guess, on their own wellness journey?
Again, I think for each person, this really becomes a personal exercise. There's not a just script that you must follow from A to Z. I think, what I do with all my patients is meet them where they are at, right? And so if you're someone that's really interested in starting the exercise program, like great, like let's dive into that and like see what that looks like for you. If the diet is where you want to begin with, wonderful, let's talk about that. So I think for people, I wouldn't overwhelm yourself and feel like, well, I got to change my diet and start an exercise program and then get my sleep hygiene intact and then, figure out how to be not stressed anymore. That feels almost stressful, right? To tell you, you got to do all these lifestyle things like now. That's the opposite of what we want to try and do. So I think 1, start small. So pick a pillar or 2 or something that you're excited about or interested in, or somebody else wants to work on with you. And then like set a small goal. And it can be, again, we usually use what's called a quote, SMART goal. So a specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and timely goal. I have a lifestyle medicine assessment. You can go and get your own lifestyle score and see how you're doing in the different domains. And, maybe that's some place that somebody could start. And then at least you have a marker that you can track over time and say, hey, I'm doing better now, which is really nice to see progress. But again, it is really an everlasting journey. Like nobody ever arrives. I mean, this is literally stuff you have to invest in every day. It's not like you just do it for a week or a year and you're set. It really is a commitment, lifelong. So I think even if you're making small but sustainable changes, you're going to be much better off than trying to overhaul the whole system and then realizing that this is just not compatible with your life. Gradual progress over time to sort of address all the pillars is probably the best way to get you to a really good state of health and happiness.
It's not like you're expecting a huge, massive change tomorrow. It's more about like really embracing little small changes every day. And I like that you have that assessment. Where can we find?
There are a couple sites online. I can send you the links to them. The American Academy of Family Physicians, the AAFP, has it available as in like an Excel file that you can download, and you can take it as many times as you want. And then there's another online version from a Spanish nonprofit, Foundation Mafre. They have it online that you can just fill out pretty quickly. The more that we ourselves can do it, I think we'll find that it can inspire other people to do it too. At the end of the day, that's what you want. You want a community that is committed to lifestyle medicine, because a lot of these things are really hard to do by yourself. The more people we have doing it together, one, the happier we're all going to be and the healthier we're going to be. But two, I think the more successful and easy it is going to be for everyone to maintain it over time.
We'll share those links on our social media and also where you can find Jonathan if you're looking for him for any advice. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here and chatting with your audience.
That's all we have today on well-being. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. Tune in for more conversations about health, happiness, and living your best lives. Until the next time, my name is Cheryl Han. Take care and be well.